we ready?
Two people are coming. Just
Okay.
One second.
No problem.
Mm-hmm.
Salam, Mr. Boltaev.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Aka. Thank you for
Really
coming.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Are you in Uzbekistan right now?
Yeah, I'm from Uzbekistan, from Termez.
Oh, Termez. That's high on my next visit. Is Termez, Navai, go out to Pakistan, Horizm. I've mainly spent most of my time in the Fergana Valley and in Tashkent. And so, but I think Termez is sort of this gem that hasn't had the focus that it deserves in terms of what it offers civilizationally, you know. But I did visit Hakim al-Termezi's site, which was amazing. You know, that was back in 1994, a really long time ago. So good to see you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Me too. Please again, please. We'll be happy.
Yeah, when I visit, I'll let you know.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Sahiba, that's the same with Navai. I'll make sure to come and visit you. See, now I'm going to get, because this is a group of Uzbeks, I'm going to get about 100 invitations, and I don't know how much, if I can drink that much tea.
Hello, Mark. You are a hero in our Telegram group, you know. Kalima Pai speaking to you. If you are staying in Tashkent, I'm waiting you to be a guest at my home.
Of course, Halima Han, how are you?
Thank you. I'm waiting for you.
You know, with the coronavirus, I was originally going to go visit in April. I had an official invite.
You take taxi? No, you take taxi, and taxi brings you to my home without any problem.
Okay. So I'm hoping that in October, November, I'll be able to come.
Good, thank you.
Okay, let's start.
Okay.
Then, yes. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. So let me introduce Mark. Well, sorry, I'm not sharing my cam. So we're really honored to have Mark Reese today with us. So he's gonna talk about his reflections on translation and reforms in Uzbekistan based on his experience translating the book Bygone Days. So Mark has begun his career 25 years ago, and he worked in Central Asia as a US Peace Corps volunteer from 1994 to 1996. He conducted field work for 8 years in Central Asia, supporting and leading activities, including program management as country director for the Department of State's Uzbekistan Partnership Program in Comparative Religious Studies, interpreter and consultant for the Department of Defense, and in-country academic research and scholarly translation. Mark has worked as a site manager for the United States Department of Defense, managing translation and cultural advisement contracts. For the last 7 years, he has worked for the United States Naval Academy, holding positions as Deputy Director for the Center for Middle East and Islamic Studies and Founding Director for the Center for Regional Studies. Most recently, Mark established the Mulaqat Cultural Engagement Program in order to support Uzbek translators, writers, and creatives in their work. He lives in Nashville, Tennessee. So, yeah, Thank you for coming. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. You know, Nadira, this is a ton of work for you to do, and so I'm really grateful. Mazuna, thank you for suggesting me. It's always an honor. You know, a part of me, you know, I turned 51 in April, and you know, I'm 18 going on 51.
Yes.
You know, and I you know, and there's a saying in Spanish that even the best of men need to be roasted over green wood. You know, green wood never burns, it just smokes, right? And so, you know, I'm just this guy who does what he does, and to get this sort of attention is really sort of surprising for me, and you know, a little bit of an adaptation to get used to it, you know, on social media and everything. So thank you both for having me today. Over the past couple of weeks, Nadira Hohn's been helping providing questions that you all have, and I'm going to try to answer most of them as I can today throughout the lecture. I sort of geared the lecture around your questions. And then, so I'm going to go on probably for about 30 minutes. I've got a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to try to show and go through that. I don't like PowerPoint, but I got some visuals that I really want to give you all. And so accept that when I bring that up, you know, that I want to share screen with you in just a minute or so. So we're going to go through the lecture on translation and reform. And then I really want to open it up for a few minutes of questions and everything. So let me start by sharing my PowerPoint and bringing that up as we go through the. Bear with me here.
Could you find the button?
There we go. Share screen.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then click on share screen again. Yes, yes. Coming.
You guys got it?
Yes, yes, got it.
Trying to get it to go. There we go.
Yes, that's a beautiful background. Wow.
You know, I've been working on developing Mulakat for about 3 years now. When I worked for the Department of Defense, they have guidelines on, it's kind of ugly to say, but they have guidelines on who you have contact with, that type of thing. And so, you know, you're certainly not allowed to go to an embassy, a foreign embassy, without your boss knowing that you're going. And even at the Naval Academy, which is really just a university. And so, but, you know, this is sort of a sad thing, but we lost our first son a few years ago. And that was really the moment where I took stock of my life and said, you know, when a man dies, does he want 2 more years with the Department of Defense? You know, does he want 2 more years in this factory? Does he want 2 more years as an accountant? Or does he want to do something that is meaningful to his life and honors the lives of the people who came before him, you know? And so I walked away from DOD, and what I really wanted to do was really finish Bygone kunlar and really get it out there and really get back to Uzbekistan and get back to what it was that inspired me for so many years ago. And so that's a little bit of my background and the emotional reasons of why I'm here today. So I sort of have a question for you all to start things off with. What does Bygone kunlar mean to you? What is Bygone kunlar about? And if you could put it in chat in one word, what is it about to you all? Is it a romance? Is it a history, politics, economics? You know, because Uzbek revolts over taxes. Okay, you know, what does Bygone kunlar mean to you? And what do you think the novel is about? And I'll give you all about a minute, if you'd like, to type in chat maybe in only one word what it is you think the novel is about. let's less than 1 minute. Let's go 30 seconds. Are you guys able to do that for me? Are you there?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, people are
typing.
writing. Yes, people are
Okay.
typing, and
Okay.
I can read the answers. So most people said romance, then Uzbek version of Romeo and Juliet. History for many, it's tragedy for some. Uzbekistan's pride, must-read book for any Uzbek.
Politics.
Okay.
Yeah, for some it's politics. Mhm.
Okay. So let me go through my slide here. Now that we have those questions, those sort of questions established, you know, what does the work of Abdullah Qadiri mean to you? What does his novel Bygone Kunlar mean to you in one word? And again, in one word, what is Bygone Kunlar about? And you've answered those questions. You have them in your head. For me, Bygone Kunlar is this lifetime voyage that I went on. When you join the Peace Corps, you don't get to decide where you go. And since the early 1960s, we've been going to Latin America and Africa, majority, with a little bit of Southeast Asia. Okay, when I went was right after the fall apart of the Soviet Union. It was a brand new area for the Peace Corps. So when you ask a Peace Corps volunteer, where did you serve? And they say Ghana. And well, what group number were you in? And they'll say group 174 to go to Ghana. Okay, to give you guys some perspective, I was group 2, right? We didn't even get a chance to meet group 1. I would go into the Fergana Valley, and old Oxacals would come up, these picturesque men in chopans and billbox would come up. These Soviet guys would come up and say, I've heard about an American, but I've never seen one my entire life. And they would, you know, they would give me a hug. Of course, we'd go drink some tea, go talk, you know. And so it was really, our Peace Corps group was really first contact. And for me, I was in Termez for about a month, and then they moved me to Kokand. Our Peace Corps training was in Samarkand for 3 months to learn Uzbek. And I can tell you back then, there were no real dictionaries in Uzbek and English. There was one dictionary. It was terrible. Throughout the 2 years in Kokand, I think I lost. Okay, are we there?
Yes,
okay.
yes, sorry.
So the 2 years that I was in Peace Corps, I was really in Uzbekistan for 2 years and 9 months. I stayed on after Peace Corps because I loved it and I didn't really want to go home. And during that time, the dictionary was completely wrong with about 3/4 of the words, right? So we had no language materials whatsoever. So it was really first contact. And so I ended up in Kokand for 1 year and 9 months, about 2 years. And I got to say, at the end of the experience, I had more questions than I had answers. You know, what just happened to me, right? My Uzbek was pretty good. I spoke some good Kuchatilla. You know, back then I had hair, you know, I still had the same goatee. Nobody liked it. Nobody liked my goatee because you're too young for facial hair. And, you know, during that period, having facial hair was not accepted, right? So here's this American kid walking around Kokand, and there I'm at in Hudurahan, really beginning this lifetime voyage. And what the picture is these young ladies are out on a day trip for I think it's the Pedagogiski Institute in Kokand, and they just wanted a photo with an American guy. And I was there because I was done teaching. I taught it in Uzbek Maktab. And if you've taught it in Uzbek Maktab, and I'm sure many people in this group have, at the end of the day, with these little animals, you just want to walk for a little while and take a few breaths, right? These kids really, really beat me to death on a day-to-day basis. And you're going to Uchinchi Maktab. And so I'm there, I'm unwinding, and the teachers come up and say, you know, the guy with the glasses in the middle, I think he's passed. I don't think he's any longer with us, but he spoke Arabic, and during the Soviet period, he was a translator in Iraq. Wow. Okay, there's an interesting country for the United States 20 years later, you know, or a few years later. And so, you guys, so Ukan Kunlar to me has been the culmination of this lifetime journey that I started at. Okay, so what does Ukan Kunlar mean to me? Of course, it's love and family. These pictures, by the way, these miniatures, I commissioned in 2002, 2003. This is Kamaluddin Mirzayev and Kahraman Shah Islamov. And I wanted to have a series of miniatures of Ukan Kunlar to someday put into a deluxe version. So this is a classic, you know, Turco-Persian miniature, Sevgi Muhabbat. You know, it's about love, it's about family. I don't know how much you can see the details, but on the pomegranate, I've got a thing about pomegranates. The branch is broken to show that they're not in Eden, they're not in Jannat, that this is a flawed world that Kamush and Uzbek have entered into. And one of the things I wanted to do with the series is to show the slow, steady influence of Russia in Turkestan, which is a theme throughout the novel. Okay, I'm still on the fence whether it's an anti-Russian book or not. It's certainly a warning against conquest, but Qadiri is really criticizing Turkestani society, the flaws that we have in our society. And so if you look at this, this is the second chapter, a young man suitable for the Han's daughter, right? And if you see the Russian shirt and the lamp that show that Uzbek is a traitor. He's going to various caravanserais. He's been to Shamai, right? And you know the fathers of Turkestan say, what's the line? He who travels is something, but he who stays home is like a reed mat. I'm going to butcher that right now. But so, you see the slow, steady influence of Russian influence in Turkestan. And this is really Qadiri looking back as a warning to his own present period of the 1920s and as a warning to you all. But also an idea of hope to you all that Uzbekistan, a Republic of Uzbekistan, would very much be within his thought process of having self-rule of what we would call the Uzbek people. So the novel is also about reform and modernity. I hesitate to say modernity because in some ways we Westerners say, well, he's talking about modernity. I think modernity is not something that just showed up in Islam or in Muslim culture, that there was backwater. Modernity's always been there. Right. So I think that more analysis needs to be given of the Han's period of where Hudar Han, the emirs of Bukhara, the Hans of Khiva, they were trying to contend with an increasingly globalized world. Right. China, Russia, Great Britain, all these imperial powers were showing up at their doorstep and the world was changing. And I think the Jadids sort of captured that from the 19th century. The novel is about ethnic conflict. It's about economic and political decline. And again, we talk a lot about the Hans not able to manage this economic and political decline, but this was common around the world at the time. This was happening in Turkey in the mid-19th century, 1848, the revolutions of 1848. We began to see what we'd start to recognize as a modern Germany, a modern Italy. There was reform within the Ottoman Empire. There was certainly reform within Russia. And I think that is one of the reasons why the Jadids went to Russia and lived there. Chopin had a Russian wife. Qadiri translated The Cherry Orchard and Marriage from Russian into Uzbek, which I sort of appeal to you all to bring up that good tradition. So here's one of my favorite miniatures from the series. It's just basically the Battle of Tashkent between the Kora Chopin and the Kipchaks. Let me tell you, Kamaluddin Aka and Kahraman Aka are very, very good artists. You know, this is sort of, you know, Uzbek Haji, you know, giving his appeal to the people of Turkestan. And I kind of wanted this grand sort of Persianate, you know, I've got them behind me on the wall, miniature of showing, you know, sort of the eternal strife within the Kokon Hane, within Turkestan, and how that was going to lead to conquest. You know, I came up with the line talking to a friend the other night that, you know, I kind of have a lot of sympathy for Uzbeks with the whole Tanish Bilish. I kind of feel at times that Tanish Bilish is not a way of life, it's prison. You are born into a system of family that you are, you know, what are you going to do? You know, I learned this as a Peace Corps volunteer. You know, you're a guest in Uzbekistan, Mark, and you've got Tanish Bilish, you've got this Mahala that you're living in, and you want to make change and you want to do things and everything. It's not as easy as being the American to show up and say, hey, I want to make change. It's just not as easy as the Jadid showing up saying, hey, we want your women to stop wearing paranjir. Okay, you know, there's a Tanish Bilish system, and I love it because I've got my own Tanish Bilish system in Tashkent that helps me get things done, and friends that I consider family that I love, and I can't wait to see them and eat pilaw with them and everything. But I think in Qadiri's world and Bygone Kunlar, I think Tanish Bilish is a prison. I think that Uzbek Haji says it, that a bunch of guys got together and decided we are going to purge the Kipchaks from Hudurahan's court. And the Kipchaks were willing to do the same thing. You know, the Korbashi says to Hamid, you know, the second bribe that Hamid shows up, basically says, this is the price of a man's life that I just took to pay for my son's toy, right? And so it's about Tanish Bilish and corruption and conquest, that these things, that these elements that Uzbek Haji is concerned about. There's been a lot of debate among Westerners. They drive me crazy when they analyze all these things. But, I think Islam is a very important element in Qadiri's life personally, and I think it's an important element of Bygone Kunlar. And we're presented through Uzbek Haji that grand tradition of why you all are who you are in the Hanafi madhab and within Sufism. When Otabek goes to Haji Magiza, Haji Maaz, and Margalan, and this famous Sufi tomb and everything, and I think that Uzbek Haji presents that as a way to reason, because Hafabul mind, but my own take is Islam is one step removed from Tanish Bilish, right? So I'm not preaching here, but I'm just saying that it's another system in which you can reason as a state and negotiate the perils of the modern world and conquests that are coming to us. Are you guys following so far?
Yes.
So far, so good?
Yes,
If I'm
so far
talking
so
too
good.
fast,
Yes,
okay.
and people are commenting. Yes.
Good, okay. So why does translation matter? So what? I'll tell you, the two things I'm most proud of are my sons and my family. The second thing I'm most proud of is translating Bygone Kunlar. Okay? But one of the things that DoD taught me, and I wasn't happy at DoD, but one of the things I learned when giving a presentation or anything in life, you always have to have the question in the back of your mind, so what? You translated a book, so what? There are tens of millions of books produced every year in the West, okay? Amazon.com is humanity's first trillion-dollar company. Jeff Bezos, the guy who started it in his garage in Seattle, will be the first trillionaire in the next 5 years. Okay, so Bygone kunlar, think about this. My Uzbek friends who want to represent Uzbek literature and culture to the world, you've got some heavy competition in the English language to compete against. So, okay, if I did a good job, if you guys decided I did a good job, okay, that's nice, thank you very much, but so what? I did a good job, right? So I always ask myself the question, why does translation matter? Why are we doing this? And one of the easy ones for me is so that people can enjoy Uzbekness, right? It's a travel guide, you know, at the very vanilla light sort of idea. It's a travel guide to Uzbekistan. I think if you read my endnotes, there's like 400 of them. It's kind of my love letter to Uzbekistan. You know, this is what Mark Reese understands of this book. Right or wrong, I love that I have the copyright because I can change it 10 years from now as I learn more. But this is what I understand. But so what I believe is that Bygone kunlar is the origin story of the Uzbek people as we understand. I am not diminishing a 1,000-year history. I'm not diminishing a 2,000-year history. But what I'm saying is that Uzbeks in 2020, that Bygone kunlar is the origin of the people, Uzbek people as we understand them today. 1938 had as much to do about the formation of your identity as anything Amir Timur did. Okay? And some of this could really piss some of you off, me saying this, but just bear with me and let me make my argument, okay? Bygone kunlar takes the memory and loss of who you were and puts it into context, okay? And you know, look, the NKVD did not show up at Qadiri's home, okay, because of Romeo and Juliet, all right? They showed up because it is a memory of who you are, okay? Qadiri, so one of my takes is as a guy who's brought diplomats and military officers and visitors to Uzbekistan. I worked at Hanabad Air Base before it was closed. You know, I thought I was going to work there for a year, and then it got closed, and then you know, all of a sudden I have a different career path. You know, life happens, right? Cowboys have a different way of saying life happens. It's a little bit more crude for this webinar. So I've taken dozens of people through Tashkent. And I can tell you, by the time they leave, they have no idea who Ali Shernavai is. They have no idea why Ali Shernavai is next to Oli Majlis, the symbolic significance of that. And I can tell you that they have no idea who Amir Timur is. He's a conqueror, and he's a hero of Uzbekistan. Okay, Bulda, tamam, let's go. My flight's tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. I got to write my trip report, and I need to give them my receipts and get paid back for this trip. And those were some really nice monuments that I saw in Bukhara, okay? Mark, he kind of helped explaining all this. He's a little crazy about this place, you know? And then they go on about their day and everything. And so my take is that Uzbekistan suffers from a crisis of context. They suffer from a crisis of explaining the so what to people. Why are you showing me the tomb of Amir Timur, okay? And so I think Qadiri had the same struggle. In the 1920s, he had thousands of years of history that he had to reconcile to create with his colleagues a sense of Uzbekness so that you could have a modern Muslim republic. Whatever you call it, you know, Uzbekistan, I don't think that was on his lips, but you know, there was a short-lived one in Bukhara. There was a short Autonom Republic in Kokand, right? You all are the natural legacy, the natural step of what he envisioned. But he had some difficult work to do to bring it all together and to define who we are and to define who they are across this new border. In order to define yourself, you have to define others. In order to define yourself as German, you have to define what an Austrian is, or an Italian, or a Frenchman across the border. Okay, so what he did, in my opinion, with Bygone kunlar, and this is my quote here, he took a constellation, a star system of luminaries, al-Biruni, al-Bukhari, Ibn Sina, Babur, and Babur is a personal favorite, Amir Timur. He took this constellation of luminaries that shaped the contours of humanity. Okay, because of al-Khwarizmi, I suffered through algebra in high school. Thank you for that. Okay, because of Ibn Sina, we had advances in medicine, right? That influenced the development of Western civilization and Western medicine. We all know this, but you got to ask yourself, if you're going to translate, if you're going to develop a tourism system, if you're going to develop a museum, a school, you got to give them the so what, right? That's a tough question. You got to be rigorous and tough on yourselves, okay? We need to push to do that, to do the so what. We need to push beyond stereotypes. Propaganda versus truth equals a credible narrative. I think one of the reasons why Amir Timur didn't stick in the West, you know, is that it wasn't a credible narrative for people, right? And it gets down to you, and I'm sorry, but it gets down to you all who are interested translators. You're more than translators. You're envoys to your own culture, to the outside world. How are you going to give people a credible narrative, right, that people can buy into? If you want your kids to read more books and get off their cell phones, I heard that our thumbs are changing evolutionary-wise because we're doing this a million times a day, okay? If you want to get kids to read the written word, you got to give them a credible narrative. You got to give them something they truly believe in, right? So propaganda versus truth, right? If you go with the truth, you create that credible narrative. Okay, so I'm tired. I'm glad that you guys are glad that, like, look, my take is, I hate politics, but in 2016, you guys started all over again. All right, and it's a reform, a moment of reform in Uzbekistan. This is the chance of your lifetimes, and we've seen the alternative, right? So I'm happy that the New York Times wrote a nice travel article and everything that might attract tourists and everything like that. But man, I'm so tired of hearing about the Silk Road. I'm so tired of hearing, about Amir Timur. Look, by the way, next week I get a book on Timur. Okay, I can read them all day, every day. I get why Timur and the Timurids is important. Okay, but it just becomes this travel thing where it becomes this caricature after a while. It becomes Mickey Mouse, right? I'm tired of the guy in the turban. Do you notice every time a Muslim is represented on a magazine, he always has his mouth open? So I'm tired of these caricatures, right? And as creative individuals, as translators and academics and teachers, it's your job to give people the so what. And to say the so what, you got to look in at yourself and say, why am I saying this today, right? So after 20 plus years, right, it was 2016, we started all over again, right? And this is, look, I love you all, man. The grant I worked on in comparative religious studies, I got to work with some of the great academics of Uzbekistan. Bakhtiar Babajana, Gapyo. Ashirbek Muminov, who's now in Kazakhstan, Gapyo. I learned so much, but we're starting over again, right? It's easy for tourism to go up 100% when you're starting from zero, right? So, we got to give the so what, so when a coronavirus event occurs and tourism goes back to zero again, you're competing again with the rest of the world. You're competing against Thailand. If people get out of quarantine, I want to go see a beach when I'm finally allowed to live a normal life again. I'll go to Uzbekistan hopefully in October. But so we have to ask ourselves the hard questions of reform through Bygone kunlar. That's the so what. You use your origin stories to tell people your own narrative. You're telling people what's important to you. You're telling people who you are as a people, right? Is it the 14th century that you guys want to tell people who you are? Or you want to talk about the early 20th century, about who you are? You know, something that is living and within your collective memory. So some of the hard questions I've asked about Bygone kunlar, and I'll be honest, you know, between 2005 and 2018, I couldn't get a visa to Uzbekistan. So that's been my biggest obstacle in completing the novel, right? And so I have a lot of questions I want to ask people. You know, I don't think that the copy that you have is the final version. It's a work in progress. It's an organic document, okay? So some of the hard questions I have, and they're unpopular, okay? And that's okay. I'm okay with people not liking me. But is it if this is the first novel in Uzbek novel, is it the first Uzbek novel to depict ethnic cleansing? Is this the basis of human rights in Uzbekistan, this novel? Because Qadiri certainly makes an argument for the universal rights of men, right? Kipchak, Khorachopan, it doesn't matter. We're all human beings. Are you really going to kill off a people so that you can get a job, right, for advancement? That's why the NKVD killed Qadiri. All right, these are hard questions. Well, you know, I'll tell you what, I don't work for His Excellency President Mirziyoyev. I'd love to work with him. But as of now, I don't work for him. Okay, so I'm Mark Reese giving you the straight cowboy Arizona no bullshit, okay? I bought into President Mirziyoyev when he started using the concept of kundashlik in a lecture to a group of mullahs. He basically said, I don't want to hear about you having second wives. If you have second wives, kundash, that's the end of you as a religious leader in Uzbekistan. Okay, and he referred to Bygone kunlar when he did it. So it's an easy thing for me saying, okay, this is a man of a different metal, a different perspective. He's looking at the harder questions in order to tell the narrative. So therefore, it made me think that Bygone kunlar becomes the measuring stick that we use to decide whether these current reforms are successful or not. And I don't think reforms are successful or not successful. They're a work in progress that you pursue. And we'll get to that in a minute with America. Okay, so I took some lyrics from Bob Dylan's A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. And this is to me to sort of confront a technical question, but also to talk about why translation matters, okay? And about context and putting hard questions into contexts so people can, you know, understand. And I won't lie, I've gotten all the crap that bureaucracy in Uzbekistan can give me about translating a novel, okay? How can an American possibly know enough Uzbek or know enough about us to translate the novel? There's no way he could have done it. Please don't represent him in the media because we're supposed to have translated this book for 20 years and we haven't translated it yet. And if this American guy shows up and translates the book, it's going to make us look bad, and certain people have sacrificed for that. So here's kind of my answer to that. This is Bob Dylan, A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. This is not all the lyrics. I can send you the full lyrics. If I turned that argument back on critics, I would say, you've been studying English for a hell of a long time. I dare you to take Bob Dylan's lyrics and translate them into Uzbek to my satisfaction. I'm a Southern male who grew up in Arizona, but my family's from Georgia. They're from Florida. I'm one of the last, what we call Florida crackers, a white Anglo-Saxon male Protestant of German English descent, you know, from Florida, from northern Florida. And I know my country's literature extremely well. And I know my Kuchatilla in English extremely well. And I dare them to try and take this our version of Ukan Kunlar, A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, and translated into Uzbek that I think captures the spirit of Bob Dylan when he wrote it, and to capture the context of the language. Okay, and let me throw some of that context at you. I've said some hard things, right, about Amir Timur, about Uzbekistan. Let me say some hard things about America. Where do you think this is? Don't have to answer the question. It's a church. Okay. Where do you think this is? I gave you a hint. It's in Alabama. The picture, the small house on the left, what do you think that is?
Someone's house, maybe.
No. That was the first White House for the Confederacy of the United States. In the Civil War, we lost 600,000 Americans. When you go to the University of Mississippi at Oxford, they lost the entire male faculty and student body. Everybody died. Massive wars. When the American Civil War broke out, Europeans laughed and said this will be a little American war that won't last. And up to that point in Western civilization, the largest battle ever fought was Waterloo, okay, against Napoleon, right? We had 10 Waterloos during the American Civil War. 10, right? My grandfathers died loving the Confederate flag. They're from Albany, Georgia. And Albany, Georgia was the one city that managed to shut down the desegregation movement in the 1960s. They threw Martin Luther King in jail for 5 days. My mother and father were going to high school in Albany, Georgia, getting ready to get married a year later when Martin Luther King was thrown in jail. Because since the beginning of our history, that middle picture there, and I'm sorry for it, that's a group of people gathering, eating their dinner, while watching a lynching of a human being being hung from a tree. You see the violence that's occurring in America today, in all the cities, 30 cities across America. Don't tell me it's not real still today, because you see that Confederate flag on the left side. 3 weeks ago, I went to see my uncle and check up on him in Tallahassee in northern Florida. I drove through Alabama, and I specifically wanted to stop in Montgomery because it had been maybe 30 years since I had been there, okay? And I wanted to stop and think about America and what's happening today in America. And, and so my parents' generation is the first generation to break away from that old past of the Confederacy, of institutionalized racism, and start to think about the world in a different way. The church you saw in the first slide was the church that Martin Luther King preached desegregation and human rights at. When you go back to this, see the state of Alabama, that building on the far right? You see that building right across from Martin Luther King in the upper right-hand corner? That's that building. And he is standing at his church. See if I can get there. Sorry, folks. For some reason it's not letting, oh, here we go. Now it's going to advance me all the way back to, see the stairwell, the white steps in front of the church? That is where he is standing in that photo in the upper right-hand corner. All right? That's the inside of his church during a famous speech that he delivered in American history. Okay? So you're telling me that Martin Luther King, 2 blocks right across the street from the Alabama State House, okay, that center picture, 2 blocks away from the Alabama State House, and 2 blocks away from the White House for the Confederacy, where they broke away from the United States Republic and tried to establish their own country. And they were willing to hang people from trees, have institutionalized slavery, okay? A black preacher preached the idea of universal love, human rights, and desegregation of schools. So you appreciate how brave of a man he was, right? You know, the Ku Klux Klan, angry white crowds, putting people in trees. Martin Luther King was an incredibly brave man. He knew he was going to die. He knew the violence that was in the South, the American South at the time, in America at the time. And if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, this is a monument that they have in Montgomery, Alabama, to those who've been lynched. And for each one of these brown objects represents a human being who was lynched in the United States in American history. So when I talk about Qadiri in 1938 so casually, and I talk about the Jadid so casually, guys, we have a really ugly history in the United States too. Really ugly. And it's playing out right now on CNN, okay? So that's why Qadiri attracted me. That was a human moment for me of understanding why Qadiri was willing. It gave me the so what. Martin Luther King, desegregation, right? John F. Kennedy at the time started the United States Peace Corps. It was this period that brought me to Uzbekistan eventually when I was born in 1969, right? It's all about how we remember things. And when you go back to Bob Dylan's original lyrics that I gave you a few slides ago of A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, that's the context of what he's going to talk about. That's what he's singing about. There's a hard rain that's going to fall, right? We're doing something. We're doing reform in America in the 1960s with people who have no problem committing violence against us. And we're going to do it in a peaceful way. We're going to do it through nonviolence. It's a heavy topic, and I'm sure that's not what you thought you were going to sign up for when you signed up for the webinar. But this is Mark Reese you're dealing with right now, okay? So why translation matters. So you've got these new 2 blocks away from the State House and 2 blocks away from the Confederate White House, right? The center of the Ku Klux Klan in America, right? 2 blocks away, they built a museum, that basically the Civil Rights Museum. And you can see at the upper left-hand corner, one day the South will recognize its real heroes. The real heroes are not the Confederacy, the people who were trying to enforce slavery in the United States. The real heroes are the people who in the 1960s were willing to die so that their kids could go to a normal school, so that we could drink the same water from the same water fountain, right? So that we could use the same hojat hona. The American South was desegregated. There were separate bathrooms for blacks. There were separate bathrooms for whites. Desegregation changed that. And you see in the upper right-hand corner, my old fat hand touching one of the monuments, and it's got water flowing over it. You know, in significant moments, the desegregation of schools, you know, was with this moment in American history that was so important, and water is flowing over it. And the idea is that in the 1960s, in my parents' lifetime, blacks and whites were not allowed to drink the same water. We can all touch the same water now, right? And the bottom left-hand corner, what's in these jars? Those are the remains of people who were lynched, that we were only able to find those remains. Those are people in those jars that archaeologists took from the ground, were able to identify them through historical documents, find them, and find them a place that honors their memory. So they're not nameless. That's what the NKVD wanted, right? They wanted the eraser of memory. They didn't want a Qadiri remembered. They didn't want a Chopin remembered. They didn't want a Thithroth remembered, right? So remembering, going back to that memory and loss, and remembering the hard things that make you who you are today is the greatest achievable moment you have in your lifetimes. So let's get into some of the mechanics of translation. I threw some heavy stuff at you. You're like, I need to drink some tea or coffee after listening to Mark Reese talk about the American South. I get a ton of questions about why you did what you did with the translation. And I tell everyone this, I am not a linguist. I took classes in linguistics as an undergraduate. I think of myself as a writer, okay? I think that in the end, you must tell the story, okay? And in the end, you've got to think of translation, in my opinion, as a writer, as a piece of art, not a science. And that's something where there could be a lot of curricula change in institutions in Uzbekistan. There's no diagram on how to translate Bygone kunlar. You got to sit down with the basics, and you got to do the work, and you've got to be persistent. Folks, I am not the most knowledgeable in the Uzbek language. That's very clear. In 2018, I'm losing my Uzbek language skills. I don't speak it on a day-to-day basis. I have a dream. My wife's from Tashkent. I have a dream of going back to Uzbekistan and studying Uzbek again, getting back into Chagatai again. I got all of that as a master's student in graduate school, and it helped me in 2005 when I sat down in Afghanistan. The base had closed. I'm in Afghanistan. It's hell. The only thing I have is Abdullah Qadir's Bygone kunlar to make me think about something other than warfare. Okay, I get 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours a night until midnight to think about something else other than the shitty day I just had, to be perfectly honest with you. Okay, and so the book, is it perfect? No, hell no. There are no perfect books. The Quran means recite, right? There are different Qurans, and once you put something into a text, it's not perfect. There's no perfect, folks. Okay, and I get a lot of that of, this machismo in Uzbekistan. Well, I don't need my work edited. That's the biggest sign of an idiot I've ever. Don't say that to me, because in the back of my head, I think you're an idiot. Okay, writing is revision. Okay, I rewrote Bygone kunlar. I finally went through it at least 20 times. I had it by at least 4 people. Okay, I had Umida Hikmatalayeva, Umida Hashimova, Mazuna Qadiri. It doesn't get better than a Qadiri, right? Like literally the last week before I'm getting ready to hit publish on Amazon, I'm asking people about words, about phrases, going through everything. To be a translator, you have to be a writer, and you have to have a sense of hope. So my quote here, my joke here is, to translate or not to translate is the last desperate question of us all, right? Do you want to translate like a science? Well, that's Google Translate, which makes no sense whatsoever. When I managed contracts for the DoD in translation, I knew when I was getting some jerk using Google Translate, because the English just didn't sound natural, right? And at the end of the day, you got to translate. You got to write the story, okay? And you got to collaborate. And that's been tough for me. I mean, most of my collaboration now occurs in the United States still. There's some mechanics within Uzbekistan that we need to look at, like international intellectual property rights, changing people's opinion on editing. I think a little bit of humility in the machismo of like I had guys, that worked for me as translator who refused to type. They would dictate their writing to their wives or their secretaries because men don't type. And I'm like, are you kidding? You're fired. I want the guy who's going to type Dari, okay, for the contract. So you got to collaborate. From 1999 to 2018, I had one bloody dictionary. A small, thin dictionary from a company that no longer exists. It's an excellent dictionary for academic work. But the Uzbek Tilaning Izakhli Lugati from the Soviet period, the 2-volume set, I have it today. I will die before I give up those 2 volumes. And most of it's Bygone kunlar anyway. You guys have written mainly, books about Bygone kunlar. Okay, the Soviet edition is really good. There's another edition from the same company that is no longer with us by Mamatov and Kadirova. It's a 2-volume compendium that I finally got 2 years ago. It was unbelievably expensive. My wife was ready to divorce me when these books showed up because she knew that I spent at least $200 on these dictionaries. So if you guys want to do translation and reform in Uzbekistan, you guys have got to get the basics. Can a brother get an English Uzbek dictionary? Can we get a new version of the 2-volume Soviet set? Like an explanatory dictionary? I don't want digital, folks. I want something printed that I can thumb through. I love books, So once you have the book in English, you've collaborated, you've asked a million different people, which means you're going to hear a million different answers, right? And in the end, the writer has to make the decision, right? So you've got an old Chagatai word or an old Chagatai phrase that from Qadiri's period. In the end, you have to put it in English, right? You have to pick terminology not from the 1990s or 2000s. I'm editing a book right now, and from somebody, and I saw dude in there. Here's another thing. While I got you guys a captive audience, like I hate being called bro. Uzbeks think that bro is a ka. It is not a ka. Bro is nobody calls me bro. I can think of 5 people who can call me bro. I can think of maybe 10 people who can call me dude. Dude's a cowboy term. Okay, it's extremely informal. Okay, you can call me brother. Hey brother, can you do me a favor? Don't call me bro. If you can't finish the word brother with me, I don't want to talk to you. Is that helping? Is that your English lesson for the day? So, but once you have it in English, you have to treat the document as an English novel. So with my translation, I tried to keep the exact format of the novel. If you remember, there's a Cyrillic version that was published in the early 90s, right after independence. Why did I use that version? Because Umida Hikmatalayeva bought it for me. Okay, there's no science to this. Life happens, right? Peshhanumda Yozolgan, that I would buy, and I would get this book as a gift. Okay, but I think it's a faithful version of Qadiri's Bygone kunlar, and I tried to keep as much of the structure of the novel as possible because there are some incongruities. Qadiri makes it really clear at the very beginning. It's an experiment with this thing called the novel. And one of the things most Westerners observe that have read it is that Qadiri speaks directly to the reader at times. That's the basis of a movie script, folks. That's powerful. A guy who died in 1938, who is engaged in reform, is talking to Mark Reese on the Afghan-Pakistan border in 2006. Powerful moment for me, right? So I've got some examples of some real pains in the butt for me and some of the things that I just decided to, and you'll disagree, and that's cool, and I love it, and send me an email is all I can say. Please don't jam up my webinar with a bunch of corrections, okay? So part of this is diplomacy that I'm engaged in. is I've spent my whole career explaining to people in Uzbekistan who don't get it, right? They'll remember the Silk Road, but they won't remember, because we know Marco Polo, okay? But I've been spending my whole life. So these notes are kind of my ode to the Uzbeks. It's a way of explaining Uzbekistan to Westerners who really care, okay? And so, but one of the points that I want to bring up is feel free to not translate. I think that naan is cooked in a tandoor. The crap that I eat on a day-to-day basis in the United States that's sold in a plastic bag at a supermarket will never be naan. It'll always be bread, okay? It's time for Westerners to learn a little damn Uzbek, all right? So yeah, I translated the novel as Bygone Days, not Days Gone By, because I do not believe in ending a title with a preposition. Look at titles of novels in the English language and you will very rarely find a preposition at the end of a title. Just not done. You got to collaborate with an American who will tell you, call me brother, don't call me bro, do not mistake it for a cop, right? That's what collaboration does. You got to be humble with that. So I kept Umida Hashimova's name up here, you know, and you know, we had these phrases that, you know, those women who need to run away, you know, in reference to, you know, women, you know, who are unveiled, who need to move away from strange men. I kept the word hashar. You know, I think hashar is a word that Americans need to learn if they're going to deal with Uzbekistan. I think it's a beautiful tradition. One of my favorite phrases that I still use, that the Uzbek influences influenced my English language, vai, 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 vai. You know, some sort of, you know, oh my God, you know, vai, 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 you know, vai, 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 vai. You know, how about this one? You know, that stuck with me for a really long time after Peace Corps. Americans freak out and don't know how to deal with me because sometimes I'll go into a room to greet people like this. It's like deeply ingrained in me to put my hand over my heart. So I've gone into business meetings where businessmen are like, okay. And I'll go like this and then I'll shake his hand and they'll say, well, that's unusual for us to do that in the United States. Again, I think kundosh is a kundosh. It doesn't translate well into English. It just doesn't. Yuldosh, John Dosh, Sinimfdosh. A Sinimfdosh is easy, classmate, right? But if you literally translate Yuldosh, right, the companion of the road, one who shares the road with me, a traveling companion. But I think it just loses something when you put it into English, right? Explaining Haji Maaz, when Qadiri's at Haji Maaz, is one of my favorite moments in the novel. In 2018, I managed to go to Margalan and I found the spot. And I will not write a travel piece on it because I'm sure some jerk in Margalan will turn it into a tourist spot and ruin this, you know, hurma and apricot orchard, right? And you know, these guys who are of the soil, these farmers who live off this orchard, probably Sufis, you know, they're gonna cut that shit down and put a mile of marble over it, right? So I don't tell anyone where it is. If you want to find it, you go find it and ask around in Margalan, and just don't write an article about it because they'll destroy it. Okay, so that was a divergence. Sorry, Mark's a little crazy this early in the morning. So, but there's a scene where there's owls in the trees when Qadiri goes to this tomb, and I find from Kamaluddin and Khakramon while living in Tashkent that owls portend death in Central Asia. I want people to understand Ak Yul as Ak Yul, right? So part of doing that is fulfilling Qadiri's dream of Uzbeks being known within their own context, not something that's being made up for them by a Westerner. Does that make sense? A little? I've got a little
Yes.
thing up. I can't quite see my own deal, but you see the first phrase, this first sentence is Yamonu Chun, Yamon Ligumbor, Hamid Holton Bazi, okay? You know, how do you translate Holtenbazi, Bachabazi? These are, you know, unseemly terms, right? So, you know, Qadiri was not afraid of talking about some serious issues. Institutionalized pedophilia. That's Bachabazi, and from my point of view. And I think he'd feel the same way in what it does to people. So Hamid is an easy guy to hate. And I hate to say, we've all known some Hamids in our life, not just in Uzbekistan, but around the world, right? So I'm still not happy with this translation of this sentence. At some point, you got to publish the book. There's a phrase in English, don't let good enough get in the way of done, right? This book will never be good enough for me. My translation will never be good enough, right? So, but I got to get it out there because I've talked so much crap about it, right? So I've polished the meaning a little bit. I am a man to a man. I am a bad person to a bad person is like sort of a literal type of take on it. You know, you can see some of the older usages of Gim in there, right? Again, collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. There's not a whole lot of Western resource material for translation. So you got to go to Uzbeks, man, and you got to ask them, what the hell is Gim, right? So I am a man to any man who does right by me, but a blackguard to those who do me wrong. Way too long, in my opinion. That's way too fatty, right? It doesn't capture the bareness, the stark statement that Hamid, the stark language that Hamid uses. It's what we call in English too fatty. And my sentence is much too long compared to the original, which is a good indicator that you screwed it up. If your sentence is too long, your translation, the sentence that you translated is too long, it shows that you're explaining too much. You're not showing what the language is. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So Judagor, these sort of terms that, you know, I love Uzbek OM. Okay.
Evil magician, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. A magician to us is someone who pulls a rabbit out of the hat. They have a female assistant, and we're going to cut this person's head off, okay? Magician comes from magi, from magus, okay? So in Uzbek OM's world, a Judagor would be maybe a seer or a witch, right? Something seductive with ill intent, right? This is just my research. But I still, again, I'm not happy with it, okay? The toughest chapter for me was the sash of Mad the Gourd. Man, a backbreaker, okay? And I think Qadiri, he's drawing upon Kuchitilla. He's drawing upon people that he knew, language that he knew. That language is no longer with us. It's generally speaking not used on a day-to-day basis anymore, right? So what am I dealing with in the Sash of Mad the Gourd that deals with Hamid, that gives them the news of Otabek's wedding, and he got these gourds that he's put around his belt, his bilbak or his sash, and he's named each one of them, and he asks Hamid, you know, if you have any naksh, like you went to Tajikistan, did you bring back any marijuana with you? You know, what am I dealing with? Am I dealing with a narcoman from a chayhana? I know that Qadiri was critical of chayhanas, right? And then you had that bullshit tradition of the Krasny chayhana to get, you know, these dens of ill repute where people are smoking opium and engaged in bachabazi. You know, who is this Mad the Gourd guy? Is he a Sufi? Is he kind of like a Kalandar? Is he a mixture of the two? Is he a mendicant? Who is this guy? And I still don't know. But you know, I'm looking forward to collaborate. You know, I'm almost done, guys, with this whole mechanical part. Here's another phrase, the top one. Those with wisdom find words. The thoughtless will bite first, then speak. Right? You know, yikes. You know, so all I can do is put some notes. Ask when I'm in Tashkent. You know, I'm working on other things now. I'd really like to get support to do Mehrabdan Shayan. and get back into it. Honestly, you know, like it's been a long time since I've read the book cover to cover. I've read individual phrases and paragraphs and pages and even chapters, but you know, I'd like to go through it again, that type of language again, because it's so freaking beautiful. The other one is Ande. You know, this is just my explanation. I'm seeing it as kind of an outcast to describe Kamush, but you look at the reputation of Margolon from the Babur Nama. Even Babur writes about Margolon as being a center of witchcraft and magi and seers and that type of thing. Is Uzbek Oyam, when she calls Kamush Ande, right, or a seer casting love spells to control Uzbek, is that within her collective memory of Margolon with this reputation, you know, of having this tradition of people who can perform magic within the Hans of Turkestan? So there's an analytical process that you try to go through. Just as I showed you Bob Dylan's lyrics and the cultural context of those words that are in that song of what he was writing about with the Confederacy and lynching and hate and segregation of the American South and not being able to drink the same water. Not being able to drink the same water, but a hard rain is going to fall that we're all going to get wet from. We'll all have the same water soon. He's almost like Moses or Musa when he's writing those lyrics, right? And so you got to go through this analytical process of understanding the context, the historical and cultural context of the words that Qadiri wrote. The NKVD killed him in 1938, and I haven't had access to any of the archives. So I've never read a journal by Abdullah Qadiri. I've met the family and gotten their perspective, right? I've met people who've spent their whole lives studying Qadiri and the words and everything like that. But we don't get a chance to sit down with Abdullah Aka and ask him, hey man, what did you mean by Ande? Choi Ching? You know, like explain that to me. You know, am I overanalyzing this, right? Am I thinking about this too much, right? Tuz hakane unutmak, to show extreme lack of gratitude, okay? Here's another one. Kafshim kucha kolgana mas. So are you hearing my Arizona Shivasa? Kafshim kucha kolgana mas. You know, a terrible Uzbek speaker. Okay.
The phrase itself is like funny.
You are wrong.
Yeah. So shoes do not remain in the street. But we're talking about Uzbek Oyam trying to find the second wife. It isn't what it, you know. So for a long time, I thought, you know, when you're a guest in someone's home, you put the guest's shoes are always closest to the door. They keep them warm. They keep an eye on. She's not going to put her shoes out on the street like a distant relative showing up for Palau, finding a second wife. She's not. She's an important woman, Uzbek Oyam, right? You know, so you know you got to have to sort of put this into context. At times, Qadiri will use sort of a phrase, "the Shariat says," right? It's almost always sarcasm. We have the same equivalent in English in the South, which is the Bible Belt, a very religious, we're the Fergana Valley of the United States, the American South. And well, you always know when somebody says, you know, Mark, the Bible says, and then you know what is going to follow is something stupid, right? No, this is not what the Bible says, buddy. This is what you're saying, right? And you're using the Bible as an excuse. Right? So Qadiri is very critical of people that are saying the Sharia says, but no, that's not what the Sharia says according to Qadiri. My favorite phrase is Akun li Odam to describe Hassan Ali. Hassan Ali is my favorite character. I'm alive today after Afghanistan because people I worked with were selfless and true. People in Kokand, in all of Uzbekistan in the early 90s, Peace Corps, we weren't welcome in the early 90s. I'll just straightforward. In the Soviet dictionary, Peace Corps was seen as the CIA. That's what it said in the encyclopedia. And no, we're not spying on you. It's hard to believe, but we're willing to send people millions, thousands of miles away to come and teach English. And that's all we want. We're not trying to build an empire, we're trying to teach you English. It's hard to, so the idea of an Ak Kungli Odam, a person who, Hassan Ali never gives up on Otabak and Kumush. And he's willing to get on his horse and ride between Tashkent and Kokand and do what it takes to keep them alive. And that's the tragedy in the end. You know, I like, believe it or not, I like Zainab. Maybe not like her, per se. I don't like Hushroy, her sister, okay? But Zainab was a victim of Tanish Bilish, her own system, that she couldn't escape from, okay? And she should have divorced Otabek, flat out. You haven't given me a son. I think that there's one chapter where there's an intimation that Otabek hasn't even come to her bed and consummated the wedding, you know, that he's not doing what a husband is supposed to do, hasn't given her a child, right? She should have divorced him. And I think they would have both been happy that way, you know? So I feel sorry for Zainab. You know, she could have made somebody very happy. You know, she could have had a happy life, right? So here's another one where I did not translate it into English in the chapter because I'm still struggling with it. But I wanted Americans or Westerners, native English speakers, just to look at the language for a while, get a sense of the language. Chaladumbu tabiachalik. Does that mean Uzbek Oyam is a little bit narrow-minded and unworldly? She's renowned for being a bit headstrong and willful towards her husband. I've met 1,000 Uzbek Oyams. You know, back in the day in Peace Corps, I took the bus between Kokand and Tashkent through Tajikistan during a civil war, okay, to get money because you guys didn't have a banking system that could wire transfer. I used to stuff sewn down into my shirt so I wouldn't get robbed, okay? And I figured out if you ever want to stay safe traveling in Uzbekistan and avoid the Yigitlar in the back of the bus, you got to sit at the front of the bus with all the Oy mullahs. You got to hang out with the old ladies, man. Nobody messes with the old ladies. They'll take you in as their son. You know, vai. Yeah, here's the American boy going to, why is he going through Hojant during a civil war in the 90s? Here, my son, have some tea. Look, we made some pierogi. You know, they'll feed you, you know. So, but they may be a little bit narrow-minded when it comes to marrying off their kids, okay? The other one is, I love Yusufbek Haji because he uses these Tajik phrases. And I think that it shows this ecumenical world of Turkestan, of a Turco-Persian, Arab, Indo-Jewish world, Buddhist world of Tengri, of Buddhism, of shamanism that became lost to the delineation of borders in 1924. You lost that. Okay, that's the tragedy, I think. I think Qadiri regretted that effort, right? Because when you say we are this and you are that, you really begin this idea of nationalism. And nationalism in the last century accounted for the bloodiest conflicts that humankind has ever known. In Yusufbek Haji's world, this ecumenical world, and the reason why I decided to get a master's degree in Near Eastern languages and civilizations from the University of Washington is I wanted to find the Arabic, I wanted to find the Persian, I wanted to find the Turkic, I wanted to find the Islamicate, I wanted to find the shamanistic terms, you know, I like the difference between Allah, Huda, and Tengri. I wanted to understand those three concepts. Okay, I was there in the early mid-90s, so I remember the Taliban coming to power. I was living in Kokand, this place that was largely tolerant. You know, the women put their hair back, tied it off, you know, and there were women who were wanting to wear hijab, and we all know what happened with that in the 90s. But people were trying to find their faith. I got to go and pray in a mosque with 5,000 people in Haid. 10 years later, nobody was in that mosque. okay? And so the Taliban's coming to power, and I'm trying to understand what's up with these guys. This is nothing about the Islam that I learned in Kokand. Nothing. You know, I had girls in my classroom, you know, in the maktab. Their fathers wanted them to be educated. You know, girls were from the young women from the Pedagogitsky Institute were going out to Hudurahan for the day. You know, this idea of educating women was central to people in Kokand while maintaining their faith. Hell, we're doing a webinar right now. I'd like to see what the percentage of women are right now. You know, I've had Uzbek men tell me a woman can never really truly translate. They don't have it within them to translate. And I told this guy, like, I've known you for 20 plus years, that's bullshit. Most of my collaborators on Uyghur Kunlar were women, all right? And because they don't bring ego into it, right? This is just my personal bias. I think women are better at collaboration, all right? So back to Zuri Behuda Mion Shikanan. You know, Yusuf Bek Haji was part of that ecumenical tradition that I so love about Uzbekistan, that was lost in crisis during the Soviet period and for a while after independence. He freely jumped between Turkic and Persian languages, right? He could sit waiting for the birth of his child, reading Dalil in Hadith and the Quran, engaged in Islamic inquiry into fiqh, into faith. And that's been, for a kid from the South, the American South, and from Arizona, it's been this incredible voyage for me. So last slide, I swear, you've all been very patient with me. And then I'm going to do one more slide, and I'm going to drink some water, and I'll take questions. Okay? The easy and the mediocrity is easy. It's easy to say, hope, bupta, we'll get on to it. No problem. Let's do this tomorrow. Reform is gut-wrenching. It's difficult. You have to look inward. To say that you're engaged in reform and change is to admit you've got mistakes that you need to correct. It requires introspection, but it also requires hope. It's not only introspection, it's a hope for a future. You know, I went to Montgomery to remember at a time when I think America needs to remember who we are, the best of ourselves, where things are pretty ugly right now in the United States. I went to Montgomery because I wanted to remember, and I wanted an example of what I want my son to become. I want him to know Martin Luther King, just as you all want your kids to know Qadiri. And I think this literacy thing, if your kids are pleasers, they want to please mom and dad. If you show them who you are as an individual, right, and you don't give in to mediocrity. I love the phrase, it's not that I'm not afraid of death, I just don't cling to life, right? My biggest fear is mediocrity. That's my biggest fear that Mark Reese deals with on a day-to-day basis, okay? So translation requires the same level of commitment. You can't make the easy decisions. You have to put yourself out there. I think, here's my theory of men who don't want to be edited in Uzbekistan, all right? I think they're afraid of showing, I think it's fear. I think they're afraid of showing people that they're not perfect. They're afraid of showing their mistakes. And you got to change the system to where that fear is taken away. I will not publish something unless it's been edited multiple times. And even when I do that, I did a second edition because I had some bloody typos. I still find mistakes. I'm still not happy. I did not capture Qadiri's sense of humor in the language. That's what I lost. That's my big failure. So reform, like translation, requires the same level of commitment. If it does not come from a credible place, nobody will take it seriously. So the question of so what, about Timur, just ask yourselves, why haven't people taken it seriously? Because is it coming from a credible place? Has it come from a credible level of commitment? This can make me very unpopular, all right? But you asked me for my opinion, and I'm going to give it to you. If you don't take it seriously, your own national narrative seriously, can you expect outsiders to do the same thing? Turkey last year spent $9 billion on cultural efforts. Kazakhstan, my friends, up north, those guys up north that you've been competing with, right, spend billions, right? To work at Nazarbayev University, a foreigner, a beginning salary is $70,000 a year in Kazakhstan. You kidding me? I'm left-handed, Chapkansky. I'd give my right hand to teach in Uzbekistan for that amount. Turkey gives grants to foreigners to study Turkish. They give grants for foreigners to come to Turkey and just learn our language and literature. And what that shows is that they take themselves seriously. If you've been to Istanbul, the Turks don't play, man, when it comes to Ataturk, when it comes to the Sufis, or the Mevlani, you know, Rumi and Konya and the whole. So what made me travel from, stepping back, what made me travel through Montgomery and stop during a pandemic to see the Dexter Avenue Church that Martin Luther King stayed at? You know, I showed up in Montgomery downtown where this is at. There was nobody on the streets, nobody. And I walked up to this church all alone, except for an African-American mother with her daughter. And we all had, you know, bandanas around our waist so we don't breathe on each other, right? And we looked at each other and cried. You know, what makes you pull over from Highway 65 and just hang out with the man? But she was taking her daughter there to say, you know, honey, this is what our family is about. This is who we are. Right? And if you don't show that your national narrative is important, nobody else is going to take it seriously. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so happy that there's a Qadiri museum that I really hope to participate in. There's a Qadiri school. You know, it matters what the content. Okay, so you built a museum and you built a school, so what? What are you going to put in it? What are you going to teach? What are you going to build that moment when I was in my early 20s and I saw the Dexter Avenue Church, and it was a transformative moment for me? What are you doing so that your kids put down the damn smartphones? Okay, 2 more points. I know that I'm probably going over time. Uzbekistan's vast heritage means that everyone lays claim to it. I've met people from China who say, well, you know, it's the Silk Road. It's really ours. Because I'm a white guy, I'll have Russian guys tell me, well, you know, we built Tashkent. They wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for us, okay? I've heard people from Turkey call it the Atatürk. And look at what we've done in Turkey, and we're going to show up in Tashkent and show you how great we are, okay? I don't give a damn about any of that. What I'm interested in is Uzbeks creating their nation based on their own terms, right? But when you control your narrative, you keep other people from telling your story for you. The Chinese will talk about the Silk Road. The Russians will talk about conquest and the great Soviet Union. The Turks will talk about Ataturk. And by the way, I love all these places, okay? My wife is Russian, okay? Chopin married a Russian, all right? Qadiri translated Chekhov from Russian, and, you know, so this isn't a nationalistic rant right now. This is, you guys have got to control your own narrative, or people are going to tell it for you. Some jerk in the New York Times is going to talk about the Silk Road for another 20 years, okay? So translation, in my opinion, towards reform, and to help President Mirziyoyev in his reforms, translation to me is the most powerful tool that you're going to be able to use in order to tell your own story and control your own narrative. I look forward to Uzbeks in the future. Personally, I think as a national effort, you should be working on translating English into Uzbek. I'm going to be a jerk here. I've met almost no one in Uzbekistan who writes English well enough at a literary level. Sorry. Ouch. I'm 51. Try write better than I do. Okay, I'm going to be a jerk here. I'm 51, but I'm humble enough to know I'll never write as good as Abdullah Qadiri in Uzbek. Okay, bulldog, you know. So, but you can bridge that gap by doing exchanges to English-speaking worlds, right? In my opinion, the only foreigner that I know that wrote really, really well in English is Vladimir Nabokov. Was a very rare man who could write in English at a native level. But it took him a lifetime to write the novel Lolita, which is, in my opinion, one of the best novels ever written in the English language. Okay? So I hope this gives you some hope, though, and that, you know, you guys are starting over. There's a liberation to that. Of we now know what we know. We've gotten past the Soviet period, and we are now truly being able to do what Qadiri and the Jadids wanted us to do, is define ourselves on our own terms. And I hope that resources will be put in that direction. And honestly, over the past 4 years, this is the first time I've ever seen this happen. Final thought, consider that when you go to the statue of Navai, when you go to the statue of Timur, when you go to Oli Majlis, or when you go to Maqbarasa Naqshbandi, Bahadinaka, okay, you are really remembering the Jadids. They are the conversation that you have not really been allowed to have, the hard conversations. And you should feel proud that you're able to have these conversations freely on a webinar. 5 or 6 years ago, I would have never have done this. Sorry. I would have never have done it to you. I celebrate you all for attending today. It's hard working alone, and I get these moments of beauty, and this is one of them that makes me want to continue doing what it is I do. Rahma.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mark. That was wonderful, I think, to put this
Can I
novel
say something?
into context and drawing the parallels between the past and the present,
Yes.
right? So I think, yeah, thank you so much. There are lots of food for thought for us, I think.
So you guys are able to see me now, not the PowerPoint, right?
Yeah. Yes, we could see you. Yes.
And I've definitely gone over time, so you've been really patient. And I have a big mouth.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, may I ask a question?
Actually, I think Mazuna had something she wanted to say
Yes,
real quick.
Yes, please. After Mahzuna, okay?
So I really listened to you with warm emotions. So I want to express my gratefulness that you are building the border between English-speaking countries and Uzbek culture.
Thank you.
This is very big. This is very, very big.
And I would only add the personal pronoun is that we are building a bridge between the Uzbek and Uzbek language and English language. And there's what I'm so excited about is, like, let's forget the past. Let's look for the future and look at the great work we have ahead of us. Right now, I'm working with a young translator in Andijan who translated Dunyoning Ishlada by Utkir Hashimov. He's good. He's good.
Yes.
He doesn't write at a native English level, a literary
yes,
level.
he doesn't have difficult language as Khodri had.
No. Hashimov's easier for me to read and understand, for sure.
Because not even Uzbeks cannot understand the language because it's very old language. Qalawan, Qaitran.
Yeah.
Yes.
Utkan.
Utkan, yes.
So any other questions or comments?
Yes, sir. Can I? I had a question and a comment at the same time. May I speak?
Yes, please.
My name is Shahnoza, and I'm a teacher at Tashkent State University of Uzbek Language and Literature, named after Alisher Navoiy, whom you have been mentioning. And we have a faculty, translation faculty, where there are a lot of young talents learning to translate, and they are working on translation of fiction as well. As we, if we, I don't know if it is possible to establish cooperation between our university and you, and I don't know, maybe if it is possible, you can come to visit our university and conduct some lectures, or at least have a possibility to have this kind of video webinars where you could share with your experience with students and comments or recommendations to those who have been translating and have their already short or long translations.
So, you know, tomorrow night I'm going to be online with Nava'i. Dr. Sirajuddinov made contact with me, and I was supposed to see him in April, but you know, life happens. So, so yeah, I've volunteered to do a webinar. You know, to do, you know, I got to be careful about managing my time because I'm editing and revising right now. But yeah, so tomorrow night I'll be on a conference call with them for their conference that they're getting ready to have. And it's going to be about the same topic. But I really look forward to maybe coming out there in October and giving a couple of lectures and meeting students. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for your.
If you've answered, I got a couple of questions, please.
Okay.
Hello.
Salam.
I got actually two questions, if you let me, because I don't know whether I will have a second chance to ask these questions for me then. So the first one was that which one did you find most difficult while translating kunlar, that's Bygone Days, into English? To keep keeping the authenticity of the work, the author's tone and language, or finding alternatives in the language while you were translating it into? Which one was more difficult?
Good one. I think what the biggest aid to me translating the novel is having lived in Kokand and lived in an Uzbek mahalla and being around natural language and trying to capture that tone in English. Again, I think my big failure is I don't think I captured Qadiri's sense of humor. You know, I can read something in Uzbek and laugh out loud over a joke, but when I hear it in English, it's just not the same. You know, like Russian jokes, I don't get them. I never get a Russian joke, why they think that's funny. Yeah, because it's a play on words in Russian probably. But, you know, so capturing the humor was really difficult, and I don't think I caught it. But, you know, it gets back into context. So the best thing that Nava'i University, for example, could do for their program is to get their students in a native English-speaking environment for at least a year. At least a year. I prefer a lifetime. You know, because your language changes over time. I don't know if I really answered your question or not.
Yes,
but yeah, the tone.
Feeling like something like sparkles, and then you suddenly get this feeling of understanding of delivering it.
Right. So once I capture the meaning, let's say, of a word or phrase, I then have to capture the underlining meaning. You know, Hemingway called it iceberg literature. On the ocean, when you see an iceberg, some ice, you've got 80% below the surface of the water, right? That's the problem of translation into another language. You're only going to capture some of that. You know, you know what I mean? So what I hope is that someday somebody says, you know what, I'm going to murder my hero, Mark Reese, and I'm going to come up with a better version that captures Bygone kunlar, that more of that iceberg beneath the surface of the water. You know, War and Peace, it's been translated dozens of times. You know, Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. You know, it's not unusual for new translations to come out. And that's something that's really hurting Uzbekistan, is the ability to do a comparative analysis between different types of translations. You know, because not much of it has been translated into English. So, yeah, did I answer your question?
Yeah, yes. And my second question was like, most people have different interpretations and impressions after they read the book. But every time they read the book, they suddenly change their opinions. They suddenly take the defense of people who they were against, like in the beginning. How about you? Does the same thing happen to you when you read the book once in a while? Probably, do your impressions change?
Yeah, my impression of Uzbek changed after speaking with Uzbeks. That there's this idea that Uzbek did not do what he was supposed to do as a husband and stay home, or that he let Kamush be among strangers. He's off buying kamus for the ladies, and that's great and everything, but you know, Kamush is having tea with a murderer, right? Hushroy is having tea, with Kamush, and dude, maybe you know. So my view is constantly changing. My view of Zainab changed over time.
Yes.
I mentioned the tragedy within my own family. Losing a son really changed a lot of my perspective of Kunlar.
My condolences. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it is what it is, and you know, but it softened me a lot, losing my son, and made me look at the novel from a more human point of view. You know, I'll admit, meeting Handamir Qadiri for the first time was really, really powerful. I met him in 2012. I was choked up. You know, it changed my perspective of the characters. This isn't a game. This isn't a PhD dissertation. This is the man's grandson. You know, you need to respect that and put your time into that, and don't disrespect him. You know, so but my view of Uzbek changed. My view of Zainab changed. The one change that has never occurred in me is Hassan Ali. I from the very beginning, I kept Akung Leodam from the very beginning, from 2005, because I love that character. What he believes in and what he's willing to do for what is right. I think I think he's in many ways the true hero. Another favorite of mine that's changed a little bit is Usta Alim. Nobody talks about Usta Alim or not. You know, that, you know, he had a loss too. And in the end, Uzbek and Usta Alim decide to go fight the Russians in southern Kazakhstan to defend the Khanate. And they've lost at love. They've lost their attachment to the world, right? But I'll tell you, the absolute most powerful part of the novel that I got to the very end that got me choked up is the very end of The Sons of Yad Gorbek, where, you know, Masul Ish, one son engages in Masul Ish, the other son becomes a basmachi, and one of them, I believe, if I remember correctly, dies during the famine. And that's Qadiri's message to you all. He takes the novel, beginning with the call to prayer, the azan that is spoken at the birth of a child, right? That's also the call to prayer. He takes it to the very end to Uzbek Oyam. I'm going to kill it right now. Jinazah, to the full cycle of life, from the call to prayer, the birth, to the death. And then he speaks to you again through the Sons of Yad Gorbek to say that we have lost something, right? And these guys persisted. One became a basmachi, one engaged in Masul Ish, you know? And so, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much.
Dear Mark, I have a question about Montgomery.
Okay.
I know that the Montgomery is full of writers. one of Montgomery's, I've forgotten the name. He read the story about the national hero of Canada, the English teacher, Anna Shirley. If you know Green Gables history, the four teachers. And I have a full of this book and disc at my home because I know that this Montgomery hero is the national hero of Canada. For example, in Japan, people come only to kneel before this and surely the English teacher. That's very interesting. You make so. And I would like to ask Nadira, you asked that getting certificate, you must join this mentor club. But for me, it's accessible. It's I try to add myself, but it's written not accessible, not accessible. I want very much to get certificate. This.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Halimapa. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Halimapa. Write to me.
Thank you. And one question, this toponymic, which toponymic of Tashkent of this time? I am waiting for webinar with Mark explaining us this appendix of toponymics you made, 400 words.
He broke up a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the toponymics.
Yeah. Toponymics is the name of streets. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's something I'm working on, is to try to come up in the notes. If you read through the notes, I try to explain places of old Tashkent and their significance, especially when Yusuf Bek Haji leaves the Urda in revolt over the taxes. There's a series of mahallas and street names that I think are really, really cool. One thing, to get back to Halima, that I did not know, my wife told me that Mustaqlik Maidana is the original spot of one of the Urdas. And that at the back of the main building in Mustaqlik Maidana, there's even an old wall that you can go to see where the Urda once stood. And so I'm really fascinated with that, with these old places. And now that I can go back to Uzbekistan, I really want to dig in. Any more questions?
No, I think we can stop. It's been already 2 hours. Thank you so much. It's been really, we got lots of comments saying, thanking you and for coming and doing this incredible job, first of all, for translating, and really people are appreciating your extensive work and so much efforts that you put into researching the context, all these political, historical, linguistic, and others, and doing this marvelous translation. Yeah, thank you so much for talking to us. Yeah, we all really enjoyed it. Thank you.
I hope this is the beginning.
Yes.
You know, if I get 20 or 30 more years on planet Earth, I'll do this for the rest of my life, and I hope that this is a beginning of a great collaboration. Thank you for setting this all up, Nadira.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. I appreciate your webinar. Thank you.
Biz de yaptım.